Hey everyone, happy Monday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. As you know, my name's Mitch Kaufman. I'm Water Polo Canada's high performance manager and host of these webinars. We're excited tonight to welcome back Heidi Malo, who, as you know, is Water Polo Canada's senior women's national team mental performance consultant. Sorry. Before we welcome Heidi to the screen, just a reminder of sort of the rules. One, la présentation c'est en anglais, mais si vous avez une question, tu peux demander en anglais ou en français et nous va répondre dans la langue que tu demandes. Also, the chat is open. Hopefully we see some traction in there. Please don't hesitate to ask us any questions about tonight's presentation or any of the previous week's presentations as well. I think that's all the ground rules we have. I'm getting pretty good at running these things, so hopefully no tech issues, but if they do pop up, I'll deal with them swiftly. And on that note, I'm happy to welcome Heidi Malo to the screen. I was going to say to the stage. Hi, Heidi. Happy Monday. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thank you for welcoming me to the stage and not on the screen.
Awesome. Without further ado, Heidi, take it away.
Yes, well, good evening, everyone. It's fun to be back. It's always a bit of a weird thing to be talking to my screen and not really interacting with you. So I'm hoping that on your end, it'll be entertaining and interactive as much as possible, especially since tonight we are talking about emotion regulation and resilience. So there's a little bit of a follow-up from the first chat that we had, which was more on focus. So there's going to be some elements that not resemble, but it follows up on what we discussed on a few weeks ago. And as Mitch kindly presented me as I'm the mental performance consultant with the women's senior team. I'm also the lead mental performance consultant at INS, at the National Sport Institute in Quebec. And I've been working with athletes of all levels for well over 10 years now. But let's get right into it so that we can start. If there's any questions throughout the presentation, really feel free to drop anything in the chat. There's a bit of a lag, but we will get to it. And Mitch, feel free to interrupt me if there's a question that I can answer as we go. If we can make it interactive, it'll be even more fun. So without further ado, what is emotion regulation? Water polo is a sport that is highly demanding physically. It is a sport that I got to learn more and more about in the last year. And I came to realize how high intensity it is and how many high emotions that you can feel. It's physically really demanding, and there's a lot going on underwater, above water, with the calls, with officials, whatnot. So it is a highly emotional game. So it's normal to feel the peaks and valleys of the energy that we can have in the water, and with that, emotions that we can feel. So what is emotion regulation? It's the ability to manage our emotion in an optimal and constructive way. We want to allow ourselves to experience our emotions without letting them overwhelm and control us. To say that we don't have emotions, no, we're human beings. We have a lot of emotions. But what we really want to work on, and this is food for thought for tonight, I want you to start really reflecting on how your emotions influence you, but we want to act on our emotions rather than react to them. When we're more reactive, that's when we can get into a little bit of trouble. So what is reacting to emotions? It's really being impulsive. You're reacting to something immediate. It's uncontrolled response to a sensation, a feeling that you're feeling inside of you. It's like this burst of energy that needs to come out. So you can often react in a certain way. That could be, it could be helpful, but often could also hinder performance. It's often also based on habit or fear or frustration. If we're used to reacting in a certain way, it becomes a habit. And sometimes we need to retrain those habits where it's a little bit more productive so that it doesn't influence or affect our game in the long run. It can lead to poor decisions in high pressure moments. And it also shifts our focus from solution-based thinking to emotional outbursts. We had talked about in the first talk that I had with you a few weeks ago in terms of solution focus. When we look at a problem rather than being focused on the problem. We want to focus on the solution. And often this is what happens when we're really in our emotions. It's going to be an outburst and an emotional reaction, and it'll be really stuck on the problem. So an example of an athlete reacting to an emotion is yelling at a referee after a bad call, and then you're losing focus. In that sense, I often hear in various sports, athletes losing patience in terms of maybe a bad call or in terms of the referee. The referee is allowed to make mistakes, and sometimes they are frustrated. They are frustrating, but you have to also keep composure, because if your reaction or your emotion is influencing the team, the outcome of the team, then it's impacting your game in a negative way. Another example is letting frustration take over after a mistake, which is going to lead to even more mistakes, right? So if we're hooking onto this mistake, we make a mistake, it creates an emotion, and then we get into our heads, and then this is our hook, and then we're just spiraling into this negative spiral, and then we're no longer in the present moment, no longer focusing on our game. And then sometimes it could lead us to freezing in competition because we're afraid of making mistakes. We're afraid of making that same mistake over again. So we just don't react. We just freeze, and then it impacts our game negatively. So basically, when we're reacting to emotions, is we're letting the emotion control you. Versus when we're acting on emotions, is you're controlling your response. So we can't always control how we're feeling, but we can always control how we're going to respond to the situation. And it's hard. It's not easy to always be in control, right? So it takes a lot of self-awareness. And this is step one for tonight, is start taking some self-awareness. Be aware of, like, how do my emotions influence me? Do they help me perform, or do they impact me negatively? So in the moment, it's important to start recognizing the emotion that we're feeling without being overwhelmed by it. And then we want to learn strategies, which we're going to discuss tonight, to help choose a more appropriate response so that it doesn't affect our focus and doesn't affect our decision-making in the water. We also want to learn to try to redirect our emotions into a focused energy or into strategic thinking. If we're able to turn our emotions into something to help us, then it could really be our ally, and it could be a weapon in the water. But often it's the opposite. The emotions is what's going to be our barrier. And then the more that we are acting on our emotions, this is where we're really starting to increase resilience and what I would call mental flexibility. So for me, a high performance athlete that can thrive in pressure situation is going to be the athlete that's the most adaptable and the most flexible in a situation. If we're very rigid, we expect things to go a certain way, then there's a lot of elements that can throw us off our game, distract us, and create a lot of turmoil inside of us and influence us in a negative way. So examples of acting on our emotions would be, yes, you're allowed to feel frustrated after a mistake, but then you're resetting your focus within a breath or two, and you're back in the present moment. It's also noticing your nerves before a big event, and then channeling those nerves into some excitement, so it becomes your ally. And then it's also using self-talk to regulate your emotions. So talking to yourself when you start feeling something inside of you, it's talking to yourself where you're staying in control and you're staying focused on the task. So the impact that emotions has on performance is it'll have an impact on our focus, it'll have an impact on our decision making, and it'll also have an impact on our motor execution. It can get slower and make more mistakes in the water. So there are some types of emotions, and I think if you've watched the movie The Inside Out, if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. I haven't seen the second one, but everyone tells me I need to watch the second one. Apparently, I will love it as a mental performance consultant. As one of the characters, they're now older, and there's a hockey player in the movie. But the 5 primary emotions that come out are joy, which is happiness, excitement, motivation. That's what joy brings us in sports. There's also sadness, which will bring out some empathy, processing loss. We could think that sadness is a negative emotion, but sadness also, the positive side of sadness is that in sport, it can encourage us to grow and to become more resilient. So if we learn from why we're being sad from our mistakes, that's where we can grow. Another emotion that we can feel is anger. And this anger that we can feel in sport, the upside to it is that it can drive this competitive energy when it's well controlled. I think we can talk about a certain hockey game that happened a few weeks ago. There was a lot of emotion in that game, and I think that emotion really helped Team Canada stay composed and stay focused on the goal and help them win that game. And then there's fear that we can feel. And the fear, the negative side of it is it could bring caution. It could put us into doubt. But the upside of fear is that it can enhance our focus and our preparation. We're going to go more into how our emotions, there's some good sides and more negative sides to it. If it's well channeled, it could really be our number one ally. Other emotions that we can feel are anxiety, jealousy, boredom, embarrassment. So it's really important to start just kind of thinking of like when I'm in the water or when I'm out of the water, before a game, during a game, after a game, what am I feeling? And I think it's important to think a little bit more beyond good or bad. It's trying to think like what kind of feelings are they? What kind of emotions is it? Is it anxiety? Is it, do I feel bored? If I make a mistake, do I feel embarrassed? Right? So learning to put more specific words on how we're feeling is a great way to grow as an athlete, to create that self-awareness. So now I want you to think of a time that your emotions took over. I want you to think of when you lost control, what happened in that moment? Did you act on your emotions or did you react to your emotions? And how did it impact your performance? Did it help you perform well, or did it distract you and get you out of your game, and it led to more mistakes, which led to more frustration, which led to more emotions? Right? So just start thinking in general, not just that one time that was maybe really bad or that one time that was really, really good, just in general. What kind of player are you in the water? How do your emotions influence you or affect you? It made me think a little bit in preparation for tonight. I'm not a water polo player. I used to be an alpine ski racer, so it's two different worlds. But it made me think of like, what are some of the emotional challenges? Since I can't really interact with you, I thought of a few on my own. So I think frustration from physical aggression. I remember watching the girls train this summer, and I was like, oh my God, I would get so frustrated when someone's on my back trying to like pulling on my swimsuit, trying to pull me underwater. For sure, there'd be a lot of frustration. Your sport involves a lot of contact, a lot of fouls that go unnoticed. This can lead to frustration, can lead you to lose your focus on the task at hand, on that present moment, and more on like how you're feeling inside of you. Other challenge that we can feel is the handling of referee decisions. We kind of mentioned it before, but those questionable calls can really disrupt the player's focus and composure. Performance anxiety, that's another big element. The pressure to execute skills under fatigue and stress can impact your confidence. How am I feeling before a game? Do I feel stoked? Am I excited? Or am I feeling that anxiousness, that fear of failure? I often have athletes try to differentiate good stress from bad stress. And for me, a good stress is I'm excited to play, whereas the bad stress is I can't wait for this to be over. So just noticing the difference, because the stress or anxiety, it's all like adrenaline inside of our body, and that can confuse us on how we feel. So just by taking a time to create a little bit of self-reflection and awareness of, am I excited for a game, or am I sometimes more fearful or excited to finish the game? There's also the managing momentum swings. There could be rapid shifts in game control. That requires a lot of resilience to bounce back after a setback, right? You might be leading the game and then it's tied, and then you lose the advantage. So it's important to always reset and come back. It's like coming back from zero after every single point. And then staying focused despite exhaustion. Physical fatigue can lead to emotional irritability and poor decision making. Think of it of when you're all mainly student athletes, right? So if you have a lot of exams at school or a lot of homework, and then you've got a lot of training, maybe you have an early morning practice, and then you have 3 exams that day, you didn't sleep well. Well, that fatigue that you're feeling just from lack of recovery is going to make you a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more emotional, and it's totally normal and it's really okay, but it's being aware of it, noticing it and seeing like, okay, wait, right now I'm tired. I might need to invest a little bit more in my recovery. So all that to say is that emotions come in waves. And so we have the picture of a wave that I drew a little line, but at the beginning, when we start feeling emotion come in, there's a situation that's going to trigger a physiological reaction inside of us. So this is at the bottom of our wave where we can see the little caution sign. Something is going to annoy us. Something is going to bother us. Something is going to trigger a reaction inside of us. Our nervous system is going to be activated. We're either going to want to go fight or flight, right? So when we have a good stress, we might want to fight. We're going to be ready for it. We're going to react well. When we have that bad stress, we're going to want to flight. We're going to want to run away, or we're going to freeze, right? So it's important to notice what type of situations can trigger this emotional reaction in me. And then as this reaction starts building inside of us, it's like a wave. The wave is going to increase, which means our emotions become stronger and stronger depending on how we're going to interpret the situation. If we get really frustrated on the situation, that wave is building. And at the peak of the wave, our emotions are intense, sometimes really uncomfortable, really unpleasant. We're not in a good situation. And then after that, the wave is going to crash. So the energy level decreases and other emotions may emerge. This is a bit of a visual component that emotions are temporary. They are not permanent. Think of it, are you mad 24/7? Are you angry 24/7? Are you happy 24/7? You know, so it's all depending on how we interpret situations. We're going to react in different ways. So an example of maybe using this wave is we're in a situation where we're 1 point down and there's just a few minutes left to the game. The game is super tight. It's really aggressive. You might have had some frustration because of some bad calls done by the referees, whatnot. So the emotion that we can feel in that moment is we feel some stress. We start feeling doubtful. We might feel fearful. And then as the clock is ticking and we're not seeing progress in the game, then maybe more emotions are going to build up, that frustration, that stress, even more stress is going to kick in. And then at the end of the game, well, you might feel deception or you might even feel relief. It's finally over. I'm finally out of that, right? So it's think of when you have emotions, instead of trying to ignore them, we want to work with them. So what we want to do is we want to learn to surf the wave. You want to surf the wave of emotions. Often we're told growing up, to ignore our emotions, or like, don't cry. It's not worth crying about. Don't be upset. Why are you mad? There's no point of it. But emotions are valid and it's how you're feeling. And it's always a question of what am I going to do with it? So the first step is we're going to break it down into pre-game, during the game, and then post-game. So pre-game, I want you to do a little bit of an emotional check-in with yourself. So there is this concept called the optimal zone of performance. And so what we can see here on the screen is this inverted U, is as stress levels increases, our focus narrows down to what is essential. So stress is good. We're often told that stress is bad, but as you know, as an athlete, stress is also what makes you perform. So there is good stress, there is bad stress. So as the stress is going up, our focus is narrowing on what's essential, and then we hit our sweet spot. This is the top of the curve. Once we hit that sweet spot, and that sweet spot is going to be different for every one of you. Your athlete A sweet spot is not going to be the same as athlete B sweet spot. Once you pass that sweet spot, that's where we get into even higher stress or higher emotions, and then our focus gets scattered onto what's the dangers all around us, because we activated our sympathetic nervous system. So when we talked about that physiological reaction to stress, so physiological reaction to the stress is our heart rate's going to go up, our hands are going to get those sweaty palms, we're going to get also sweaty feet, we're going to get more muscle tension, our digestive system is going to be activated, our pupils are going to be dilated, and these are all signs that we're sending to our brain saying like, red alert, something's happening. But you're in the water, there is no danger, you're safe, relatively safe. But your brain doesn't know that, right? So it's reacting to something and it's going to want to protect you. And so it's just normal that when we have a very high level of stress, then your eyes are going to go start focusing on what's dangerous. So suddenly maybe the opponents are really big. They're really fast. They're like big fridges. You can't get through them. The ball is just really slippery. It's not working. The water is really hard. It's lots of waves. I can't breathe. And so this is where we're focused on everything except for the task at hand. So it's really important to recognize what is my sweet spot and what does that look like. And so one example that I like to use is a thermometer. So it's this concept of a thermometer, and I mean, I didn't invent this. I think a lot of my colleagues use this as well. But think about, in your house, many houses now, like the thermostats in the house, they're digital thermostats, and you can really choose the temperature in every room. So like maybe in your bedroom, 16 degrees is too cold, and 21 degrees is too hot, but your sweet spot to sleep well at is 18 degrees. So you set your thermometer in your room at 18 degrees, and that's your perfect temperature to sleep at, and that's where you recover and sleep well at. Now bring that inside of you, because the thing that's hard with mental performance and mental skills is that it's very subjective, and it's really dependent on how we perceive things. So as an athlete, I'd like to ask it's okay, well, when I perform my best, what's my temperature? What does it look like? So I would say, let's say we do it from a scale of 1 to 10. 1 to 5, it's pretty in chill zone, relaxed, calm state. 5 is neutral. And then 5 to 10, as you're going to 5 to 10, you're getting more and more intensity, more heat. Some athletes need to be super pumped up to perform at their best. Some athletes need to be calm. And then maybe it could depend on the team, the opposing team we're playing. Maybe some, I don't know, some teams it's a really high pace, really aggressive game. So you need to be super pumped up, or maybe you need to be even more calm because you are an already really like aggressive player in the water. So you need to calm it down. So it's really, I think it's a way sometimes of working with the temperature of putting a number on what's my ideal state that I can perform at my best. And so then when you're in preparation for a game, you do a little check-in with yourself saying, okay, where am I at? If your aim is a 7 on 10, that's your ideal state, is a 7 on 10 in terms of activation, in terms of not stress levels, but just like intensity, aggressivity, maybe joy, happiness, like being pumped up. If it's a 7 on 10, well, what does that look like? What does that feel like? And how do you do it? So then when you're preparing for a game and you do a little check-in and it's like 10 minutes before the game or 5 minutes before the game, and you're like, oh my God, I'm super chill. I'm like a 4 on 10. Well, then you're too calm, so you got to pump it up a little bit. So you want to increase your temperature. So some strategies to pump yourself up before a game is rapid breathing. Breathing quickly is going to increase your heart rate. That's going to activate, energize your body. You can listen to some energizing music, some fast music, fast-paced music, music with lyrics that pump you up, that put you in a good mood, in a good headspace. Those are ways also that have been proven to help athletes perform. You can also use visualization tactics, feeling like good sensations, good plays in the waters, things that will like get you stoked, get you ready. Your self-talk. Ask yourself, what am I looking forward to? What are you excited about? And then you can also use physical activation where you can pump yourself up, right? We want to increase the heart rate. So you can do like, I would say, talk to your strength and conditioning coach about this, but doing, I don't know, jumping on spots, doing a couple little like fast sprints. Also just sometimes like contracting your muscles and relaxing them quickly could help also activate your body. If you're preparing and you were aiming for a 7 on 10 and then you realize you're like, oh my God, I'm like at 15 on 10. You're super activated, maybe a lot of stress, maybe some anxiety is kicking in there. Then you need to lower your temperature down. So by slowing down your breathing, and I'm going to have 3 breathing tactics for you to do after. Slowing down your breathing can help you calm down a little bit. Listening to some relaxing music, slower paced music can help also calm the mind down, calm the body down. Having these keywords to focus on and focusing on like some key anchoring or grounding words, and focusing on the process, like what's your job, what you want to do, and like really building the confidence around those pieces can help lower the bad temperature and just get you to that sweet spot. And then that muscular relaxation. So tension, relaxation, like you can squeeze your muscles for 5 to 10 seconds, release, and then doing some stretching can help you also lower that temperature. So take a moment, just think about like, okay, when I perform at my best, generally, what am I at? And I've been doing this for a few years with athletes, and a lot of everyone's different, right? And some athletes, they're going to tell me that they need to be more like neutral, the 5. Some need to be calm, like a 4 or 3. Some need to be at a 7, 8. If you're between two numbers, I say, well, if it's between 7 and 8, put yourself at 7.5. Whatever makes sense to you is the good answer. So then what you can do pre-game, right? Like, as I mentioned, if you're too calm or you're too excited or too stressed, some pre-game strategy you can do is some breathing. So we have box breathing. So what box breathing is that you inhale for a count of 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold for 4 seconds. And you can repeat this 3 to 4 times. And what box breathing does is it helps reduce your stress, and it helps improve focus. I say 3 to 4 times. Ideally, what I highly encourage you to do is this type of, like, these strategies should be practiced before a game. This should be in your habits, your daily habits in terms of training, right? You train physically in the gym a few times a week. You train it in the water a few times a week. Well, this is part of your mental training. And it's something that should be trained regularly and not just on competition day. It'll make it a lot more efficient and effective. And what I highly encourage you to do is trying these 3 different breathing exercises and choose the one that you like. Choose the one that works for you. There's no wrong answers. There's only the one that will help you. The second exercise is it's the belly breaths. So as you can see in my image, is what you want to do is you really want to breathe in. You want to, I'm used to explaining this one in French. You want to breathe in through you want to blow up, I guess, like your diaphragm. So it's like your stomach is blowing up like a balloon as you breathe in. And then as you breathe out, it's like your balloon is deflating. And so what these belly breaths does is it helps strengthen the diaphragm, which enhances your lung capacity and promotes efficient oxygen exchange. So learning to breathe, it's diaphragmic breathings. There's so many YouTube videos out there that shows you. Another way that I explain the diaphragmic breathing is if you've ever seen a baby breathe, babies breathe really well. Us as adults do not breathe very well. We tend to breathe a lot through the chest and not so much through the belly. And babies will really do the belly breath. So if you watch a baby breathing, you're going to see the belly going up and down, up and down. They breathe really fast because they're much smaller. That's the type of breathing we want to do. So when we breathe in through our nose, and our chest should not move. It really should be the belly that is expanding. And then when you're breathing out through the mouth, the belly is deflating. And then the third way of breathing, and a third exercise that you can do, is coherence breathing. And this is really good for optimizing heart rate variability. So what happens is that when we're stressed, we tend to change our breathing pattern. We tend to breathe faster. So when you breathe in, your heart rate goes up. When you breathe out, your heart rate will slow down. Because we're stressed and we're breathing faster and faster and faster, that's what's going to help. That's what's going to start increasing your heart rate. And then after that, that heart rate will send the signals to your brain that you're stressed, and then there's going to be more physiological reactions that follow up. So often when you hear that you're stressed and somebody says, go and breathe, well, this is one of the reasons, is that if you exhale longer than you inhale, you're going to slow down your heart rate. And so story time, I guess. I had done this with an athlete in preparation for the games a few years ago. We had worked on, we did some biofeedback training, and we worked on her breathing for a good year, 2 years. And we had tracked her heart rate in competition, and we had found a certain threshold of her optimal heart rate. So I think when she was at like 120 beats per minute, she was quite consistent in her performances. And when she got to the games, her heart rate went up to 190 and she was just standing. So when her coach saw that on the Polar app, saw her heart rate like really boosted up, he told her, said, okay, go into your breathing. And she was used to training her breath, inhaling for 4, exhaling for 6. So she went, sat down, did a couple of minutes of breathing, and because she had trained it, her body reacted a lot quicker. It took a couple of minutes, and her heart rate went back down to 130, and then a few minutes later, it went back down to 120. Was she nervous? Absolutely. But did she feel in control? A lot more, right? So if you're feeling the jittery of the stress or anxiety, or you're feeling shaky, or you're feeling your heart rate is really going fast, this is a really great way. And it's doing it with the belly breaths, counting inhale for 4, exhale for 6. And if you train this out of the water, what happens is that this can become what we call rescue breaths when you're in action. So when you start getting really frustrated or you start feeling overwhelmed and you need to slow down your breathing, you can do this on the side of the pool if you're out of the water, like 3 or 4 breaths, and it's going to start calming your nervous system pretty quickly. And then you're going to be able to regain control a lot quicker. So like I say, there's apps like for the coherence breathing on iPhone. There's in French it's respire, but there's breathing apps, and you can just choose the settings. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. That's going to help with the calming. The box breathing is going to help with the focus and reducing the stress. And the belly breath is just a really great way of learning how to breathe to relax. So these are strategies pre-game. During the game, what you want to do is the 3 steps reset. So example, the situation, you just got a bad call from the official. What do you do? So in the heat of the moment, you're going to feel this wave of emotion. You're going to be like, oh, that really makes me upset. Like, I don't agree with that. So in that moment, what you want to do is you want to recognize how you're feeling. I don't want you to ignore your emotions, because ignoring emotions leads to nowhere. It's like a boomerang effect. The more you ignore it, the more they're going to come back to you. So you want to recognize how you're feeling in that motion, in that moment, and it's got to be done fast. Because if you're in the water, it's got to be done real fast, because the game is going to be in action pretty quickly. If you're out of the water, then you have a little bit of more time. So you can have a moment to feel the emotion, recognize how you're feeling, but then you gotta accept it. We gotta let it go. Okay, so if you're always holding on to the emotion, you're just going to start ruminating and building it, and then it's going to be this spiral where you're going to create more negative emotion that's going to lead to more frustration, that's going to keep you focused further and further and further away from the task at hand. So step 1, recognize how you're feeling. Step 2, accept the emotion, say it's okay. Then you got to think, let it go. You got to reframe the situation, and then you want to refocus on where do I go from here? What's my job? What do I want to do? Right? If you're having a hard time, if you're in the action and you're in the water and you're having a hard time accepting the emotion, my advice would be park it. Put your emotion on the side of the pool, and we're going to get back to it later on, because right now you need to be in action. You need to be focused on the task. If you're focusing on the emotion is going to control your game. I want you to be focused on the task. And then when you're out of the water, we can revisit how you're feeling. Sometimes that emotion's already gone. It's already dissipated, right? So it's learning how to separate your thoughts from how you're feeling and reshifting the focus on the task at hand. And this ties into a little bit of what we talked about. Well, actually not a little bit. It's a slide from our first chat. So if you didn't watch the first one, I encourage you to go watch it. But it's identifying situations that will distract you. I call it distractors, but it'll be situations that are going to get you frustrated, situations that are going to get you upset, get you frustrated, get you mad, whatnot. That's going to throw you off your game. And then start planning. This can be done. Obviously, don't do this during the game. This plan should be done way before a game. But start planning. How do I want to react? What do I need to focus on? And the keywords to help you reset. We talked about this in the first chat. that we had a few weeks ago, I just want to add it in because there are ties, focus and emotion, everything in mental skills are kind of interrelated. So whatever you did in the first session that we did together is going to help you with the emotion regulation. Then other strategies during the game is to find focus cues to anchor yourself. Right? So with this focus plan, it's like thinking of scenarios that can throw you off their game and really think of like, what am I going to do? And then if you're starting to feel this buildup of emotion and you're about to explode, one of the strategies I would say is go underwater and just give a good scream underwater. It's going to evacuate because emotion is energy inside of your body that you need to throw out. If you have too much energy, that's where it could lead to too much anger, too much frustration. That's going to influence your precision, your decision making, your strength, right? Maybe it's going to your throws are going to be too strong and then not precise enough, and it's going to lead to more mistakes. So if you have a moment, right, go underwater and just like let it out. Take a moment to scream, to do whatever you need. You can also do very strong. That's a tactic I use a lot in hockey or in golf. Is if you're really upset about after a shot, just squeeze your club or your stick. Squeeze it really hard and then release. It helps take away some of that energy inside of our body, that negative energy, and it helps reset, right? You can find visual cues that if you look at, I don't know, it could be the nets in the water, it could be the ball, like that. You make a psychological or an emotional cue that when you see that, it means reset. We're in the game, right? So, and then keywords, of course, are always helpful. Post game, what we want to do is identify, like ahead of time, is if you have a bad game, make a plan in the sense of identify the ideal time and place to express your emotions. So in your sport, I mean, when the game is over, it's over. In other sports, like I'm thinking of one sport where they can do many performances in one day. And so if an athlete is upset about their performance and needs to race 20 minutes later, well, then what we do is we're going to figure out, like, okay, when you get off the ice, what are we doing? Okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes to live in my emotion. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to experience the emotion. I'm going to let it out. But then after that, I reset, right? So you find a spot, a place where you can deal with your emotion, where you can process the emotion. And also is think of like, do you want to be alone during this moment, or do you prefer to be with somebody? But I highly encourage that you set yourself a time limit. If all you're doing is ruminating all night long about how, and you're feeling sorry for yourself about how upset you are about the game, or you're still upset about a bad call, or about something that a player did in the water, or something that upset you by a teammate, by an opponent, by the coach, whatnot, you are draining energy. And we mentioned your sport is very taxing physically and requires a lot of energy. So especially if you're in a tournament and you're playing many games in a few days, it's really important to reset. So identify a place where you can, if you need to cry, if you need to yell, I don't want you to get hurt. Do not punch a wall. That is not ideal. I know athletes sometimes do that, but you need to find a way. It could be throwing a ball on the wall. It can go for a walk. Just finding a way of how do I process my emotion. It could be also, I had an athlete doing the way they would flush out their energy was when they were doing their flush on the bike. That 20 minutes on the bike was the moment that they were just evacuating the emotion. So all that to say is that I want you to put a time limit and I want you to feel the emotion. I don't want you to ignore it. But then once you felt it, be like, okay, what am I doing from here? Where do I go? And so ideally what you want to do is after a bad game or a bad practice is once the emotion's passed, once the wave has crashed, after you give yourself a time limit, 5, 10, 15 minutes, I want you to adopt a neutral perspective on your performance. I want you to look at your performance as if you were observing it. Sometimes we're in it and we're very judgmental. And so if we're observing, it's going to be easier to identify key facts of our performance. So for instance, an athlete that tells me I suck today, it was a terrible game. That to me is a judgmental thought. But if an athlete will tell me I suck today, I was missing precision in my throws, I didn't have enough energy. I didn't sleep well all week, and I was sick the night before, and I didn't eat enough. Those are not excuses, but they are a key fact that could influence and affect your game. Another key fact would be like, after every mistake I did, I was really hard on myself, and I was very negative, and it took away a lot of my energy. Okay, that's a fact. It's not just I sucked, I'm terrible, I'm no good, I'll never be a good player. Those are all judgmental thoughts. And then if you're unsure, if you're having a hard time identifying key facts, and you need some questions answered, ask for the constructive and honest feedback from your coach or from a teammate, right? Honest does not mean being mean. It does not mean being uber negative, right? Constructive is the coach or your teammate is going to tell you something that is constructive, saying like, this was good, we need to work on that. It's helping you find solutions. And then key questions to ask, and we discussed this in the first talk, was identifying what am I proud of? Because sometimes we can be hyper-focused on that one mistake that cost us the game, but that you did a whole bunch of other really good things in the game. Maybe really great points, good passes, good assists, whatever. Right? So it's important to take a step back, zoom out, identify what am I proud of? What did I do well? What do I want to improve on in my next game? How will I go about it? And what did I learn? Right? So that way you're being a little bit more compassionate, a bit more constructive. That's going to help with that confidence building after having a rough patch or a rough training or a rough practice or a rough game. Then it's also important to realize your fatigue level, right? Recovery is just as important as training. Your recovery is really going to help you with your emotional resilience. Through these talks that we've been offering, you had the nutritional strategies from Martin. You're having the physical training with Nico. With me, it's more the emotional, the mental side. But just realize that you are student athletes that have more than just water polo in your life, and there's a lot going on. There's family dynamics. There's friendships. There's relationships. There's school. There's work. And all of those elements can be taxing and it could be draining. So just realize that when you're tired, small problems seem very big. So it's important to recognize saying, you know what, right now I'm pretty tired. I may be making this a much bigger deal than it is. So I'm going to sleep on it. And tomorrow we're going to reassess when I sleep well. But before we get to this fatigue state and then realizing that these small problems feel like a big problem, maybe integrate some micro recovery moments, some small rests throughout your day, right? So some little rests between, let's say you're rushing between school to practice. Well, take a moment on the commute towards the pool, maybe to do a few, 3 minutes of breathing, just to calm your nervous system down. Maybe you had a bad day at school, so then it's like taking a moment to feel like saying like, yeah, I had a bad day. You're stating it, you're naming it, you're allowed to be upset from your day, but being like, okay, it's in the past. I can't really do anything about it right now. So next it's practice, and what am I looking forward to? So to start amping yourself up through your self-talk. That way it's a good way of separating, something that happened outside of the pool, and so that it doesn't come and influence you in practice. Plan mental recovery days, right? You all have days off from training. Well, I think those days off, it's also a mental recovery day. How many of you tend to procrastinate at home? You have the day off, or it's a day that you're supposed to be studying, and all you want to do is watch Netflix or watch YouTube. But during that whole time, your mind is running, saying I've got so much work to do. There's this to-do list that's never ending, and you're just not doing it because you're super tired. That rumination is not recovery. That is not a mental recovery day. You may as well do it and then plan get the tasks out of the way, and then plan a day where you can disconnect from sport, disconnect from school, and do something that fills up your cup of energy. Right? Maybe it is that day of watching Netflix, or maybe it's a day of going out in the mountains, out in nature. Those are mental recovery days. Sleep and nutrition are key for emotion control and decision making. I had an athlete that we realized she kept losing focus in practice, and then we realized she wasn't eating enough. So because she was under eating, all the self-talk would get to negativity. She thought it was performance anxiety, but then when we realized it was like, you know what, maybe we need to fuel a little bit more before practice, it made a huge difference. Sleep is a big one. As teenagers, you need your sleep. And I know it's hard as a student athlete. You have a lot of homework to do. You have exams, you need to study, but you need to prioritize it. So if you can't get a full they suggest 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Can you get a nap in during the day? Is that a possibility? A 15-minute power nap? Or it's also assessing, am I having caffeine late at night? Is that affecting my sleep? Are there things that I can do to optimize my sleep, like the breathing exercises or meditation before going to sleep, or doing journaling, doing what I call a brain dump journaling. So that way you can get a good night's sleep, you recover, so you become a lot more resilient to your emotions the next day. So to recap, normalize your emotions. They are temporary. Okay. I don't want you to ignore your emotions. I often feel athletes will tell me like, I shouldn't feel this way. No, you can feel that way. You're allowed to feel that way, but what are we going to do about it? Where do we go from here? That's where we accept these emotions versus give up, right? We want to accept what we're feeling, and then we want to let them go, right? If we can't do anything about it, we got to let it go. I often say, let that S go. We just got to let it, or just think about Frozen. That's a beautiful movie or song that we can think about when we're frustrated. Just let it go. If we can't go in the past and change it, then we got to move forward. We want to act on versus react on the emotions that we discussed earlier. You want to recognize your optimal zone. So your temperature, what's my optimal temperature? Realize that fatigue impacts your emotions. So you need to manage both. You need to manage your fatigue, your recovery, your sleep. You also need to manage how you react when you're tired. Build routines for pre, during, and post-game recovery. So pre-game, it's the breathing exercises we talked about. We can work also on visualization. We can do self-talk, get you pumped up, calm down. During, it's how do I let go of the emotions quickly, and there was some strategies giving there. And post-game, those reflection questions. And then I often give an example of emotion regulation is, I live in the Laurentians in Quebec. So if you don't know the Laurentian Mountains, they're very small. They're the oldest mountains in the world, so they're very small and rounded. So I figured, I often ask athletes, I'm like, do you want to be like the Laurentians or do you want to be like the Rockies, where there are like lots of big peaks and valleys? Ideally, in our emotion regulation, what's a lot less tiring are the Laurentians. So small peaks and valleys. You're going to have some peaks, you're going to have some valleys. The goal is to get out of the valley a little bit quicker. But if it's big highs and then big lows and then big highs and then big lows, it gets very, very taxing. So through the strategies that were discussed tonight, you might be able to help create a little bit more consistency, less highs and lows. So as a final challenge, I would highly encourage you to pick one emotion regulation tool and practice it in training, apply it in training, see how it helps you. It could be the breathing, it could be the visualization, the self-talk. It could be the going underwater and giving a good scream. It could be the muscle tension. Just pick one, apply it in training, see how it helps you. Do it more than just once to really seek the benefits. But I think that it could really help you with your performances. So on that, I would like to thank you. I don't know if there's any questions, but I wish you the best. Have a great season. Hopefully these strategies and tactics will help you going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Heidi, so much. We're going to just hang out a bit because there is that delay between the presentation and the chat. And as we wait for questions to come in, I did want to highlight that the sport of water polo has a lot of key, it is really unique in that there's lots of built-in moments for those resets you were talking about. When you're frustrated with the referee because you got a bad call, well, all of a sudden you're in the kick-out box and there's your chance to do a just real short reset. And even you could do it right after a goal before you run the after goal play. There's all these opportunities within a game that's built into our sport already that allows you to reset and everything. I also thought, my mind was running during this presentation, in case you can't tell. I thought it was awesome. I also thought in terms of the mental resets and the visual cues, you know, back in 2016, Washington Capitals goalie Braden Holtby went sort of viral back then. I don't know if you would still call it viral, because after every goal or after every commercial break, he would shoot water up into the air and try to count the drops before they would hit the ice. And just that little act really allowed him to reset after a goal or after a big sequence in front of him. So as you were saying, you know, whether it's dropping underwater and letting out a big scream, throwing water up in the air maybe, and you try to catch it, whatever it is, you know, there's that opportunity for you to design whatever works best for you.
That's exactly it, right? So like in terms of mental performance and mental skills, it's that there's not this one set recipe that's going to work for everyone. It's what works for you and what's constructive, right? You don't have a target on your back. There's one element that I and thanks for your share there, Mitch. Grounding. Right. So if you feel that you're really in your emotions and you're really spiraling, sometimes just having a moment to ground yourself, feel the water on your body. If you're in the water, if you're out of the water, feel the ground underneath you and just kind of connect with the ground, connect with the water. So it helps bring you back into this present state instead of being up in your mind, in your head. That could be a really good strategy too of resetting, you know. And then other ones, like you've got Nadal, who has these crazy like tics or talks, I guess, or superstitions. But the more I was observing Nadal, you know, in his games, I don't know him personally, but the placement of his water bottle, that is a tactic for him to reset. He's very methodical about it, and his water bottles need to be placed in a certain way. But when he does that, that's his mental reset, his emotional reset, to get him back into the next set or into the next point. So everyone has their own special techniques. It needs to be practiced. And I think that's one of the faults I think that we have as athletes, is that we only use mental preparation when we need it, when we're under stress or we're not feeling good or like we're in a crisis. But the mental tools and the mental skills that we teach you, they should, you know, we should try to apply them on a daily basis. It becomes almost like a habit, and then it becomes more an automatic. And then it's easier. You're going to have a lot less peaks and valleys, and you're going to be able to be a lot more resilient and recover quickly emotionally from mistakes and frustrations, because you've trained it. You feel frustration in training. So, you know, in game, it's a little different, but it's the same, just different, a different environment.
Yeah, awesome. Look at me go. Where I should have had this maybe 10, 20 years ago. So I hope everyone watching has been taking notes. No questions have come in, so I think we're okay. The last couple weeks, we've been ending a little early, just as one or two questions kind of came in. Doesn't look like that's happening. So once again, Heidi, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, and thank you, Water Polo, for offering this to the athletes. Hopefully, you guys took anything out, and if there's anything, you know, you'll be able to rewatch it, or, you know, shoot Mitch an email, and I'll be happy to answer.
Yep. If there's any emails, any questions that come up as you're rewatching, as you're thinking of your mental strategies to help you, feel free to email me, and we'll get Heidi's response to it. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Have a great night, and we'll see you April 7th. We're delaying that one an extra week for Nico's second session, and that's our final one. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much, Heidi. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.